The brutal Manson family murders, also known as the Tate LaBianca murders, marked a turning point in American culture. Did Charles Manson get an assist from the American deep state in transforming hippies from harmless counterculture peaceniks into bloodthirsty, drug-addled killers in the minds of the American public? Tom O'Neill's investigative masterwork, Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s made me think, probably. Joan Didion famously wrote in her book, The White Album, "Many people I know in Los Angeles believe that the 60s ended abruptly on August 9, 1969, ended at the exact moment when the word of the murders on Cielo Drive traveled like brushfire through the community. And in a sense, this is true. The tension broke that day. The paranoia was fulfilled." Pamela Des Barres, the real-life inspiration for Penny Lane in the movie Almost Famous, also noticed how the murders were a flashbulb moment for LA, telling the Los Angeles Times, pre-Altamont and pre-Manson, it really felt like the most magical place to live. Professor Daniel Kane of Sussex University put an even finer point on this, telling the BBC that Manson managed to exploit the hippie subculture brilliantly. Noting how hippies of the time were checking out of establishment structures and creating their own utopian enclaves, he says, Manson took on all those signs, LSD, music, free love, communal lifestyles, and reframed them as tools for apocalyptic mass murder. Is it possible that an outside force helped Manson accomplish this? Perhaps it's all a coincidence, but before the Manson family murders, the US government was running a top-secret mind control program named MKUltra that specialized in using LSD and speed to turn normal people into assassins. Even more coincidentally, MKUltra researchers like Jolly West were experimenting on hippies in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco during the same time Charles Manson was living there before the Tate LaBianca murders. In fact, the Tate LaBianca murders bear eerie hallmarks of what MKUltra's covert manipulators were trying to accomplish. How strange that amidst the tumult of the 1960s counterculture and the anti-war movement, when hippies were leading the vanguard against top-down establishment control, that a horrific event like the Manson family murders could simultaneously shock the world and change how the public perceived hippies, free love, communal lifestyles, and mind-expanding drugs. Even hitchhiking. Is it all a coincidence that at a moment when the US establishment was 1. Panicked about losing control, and 2. A government agency, the CIA, was experimenting to try and turn unwilling human test subjects into psychotic killers and combining LSD and speed, that 3. The Manson family went on an LSD and speed-fueled murder rampage that 4. Altered the way the American public perceived hippies and counterculture, undermining a serious threat to the American establishment? If you are looking for motive and opportunity, both are present. Writer Tom O'Neill never expected to uncover this story. His book started as a plum assignment from Premiere magazine after years of writing cushy celebrity interviews. What began as a retrospective for the 30-year anniversary of the Manson family murders turned into a truly epic work of serious journalism. Almost 20 years after he started investigating, O'Neill finally brought this story to the finish line, a masterwork. The definitive book about the Tate LaBianca murders, Helter Skelter, was written by the trial's prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi. Turns out having the prosecuting attorney write the definitive version of the crime he prosecuted was perhaps a gigantic conflict of interest. O'Neill interviewed Bugliosi for his Premiere magazine story way back in the beginning. Almost as a lark, he asked Bugliosi for something juicy that people didn't already know about his story. That one tidbit leads to another, and another, and another, and suddenly you're 250 pages in, learning about truly stunning acts of bureaucratic incompetence and obvious cover-ups all over the place. O'Neill frequently breaks the fourth wall, bringing the drama of writing this book into the narrative. We sweat right along with him as deadlines pass and extensions lapse. I will admit that when I began this book, I was skeptical about links between Manson and MKUltra. By the end, it seemed more than plausible. Writes O'Neill, the FBI and CIA had induced the left to feed on itself among competing factions. The more I read about it, the more I saw how someone like Charles Manson could fit into a scheme like this. I was only speculating, but I knew that he'd spent a lot of time in Berkeley, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, often inveighing against the Black Panthers. and I had reliable sources suggesting that he was an informant, or at least hanging around with others who could have been. In a story that reminded me of Jack Nicholson's character in The Departed, Charles Manson was repeatedly caught and released for crimes that should have sent him back to prison. Despite being on federal parole, Manson never seemed particularly worried about being arrested or caught by police with underage women or weapons or stolen property or whatever. In another strange coincidence, Manson's parole officer, Roger Smith, Manson was his only case. That's a thing, right? Wrote a study that examined propaganda used against San Francisco's opium smokers in the early 20th century. Police organized an effort to frame opium addicts, peaceful by the nature of their addiction, as deviants who posed a threat to society. Eventually, agents were assigned to pose as opium addicts in order to characterize the addict as a dangerous individual likely to rob, rape, or plunder in his crazed state. The plan was a roaring success. O'Neill writes that the shift in public perception made it easy for police to crack down on the Chinese-American population. Afterwards, the local Asian community were viewed as a threat to the existing structure of life in this country. It's hard not to see the parallels between this old scam and what happened with the public's perception of hippies after the Manson murders. O'Neill describes his grief that he never got anyone to admit to a giant cover-up. There was also no single piece of evidence that confirmed all of his suspicions. In the end, O'Neill never tries to prove that the Manson family was innocent of their crimes or that it was inappropriate for Charles Manson to die in prison. But the connections he found between the American deep state and one of the biggest murder cases in American history are too numerous to ignore. The fingerprints are everywhere. I highly recommend this book. It is entertaining and tantalizingly suggestive. Please give a like, follow, favorite, and sign up for my Substack so you can have my posts sent directly to your inbox. Let's make them pay.